call the meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order. First is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll open up for the first public comment. Maybe none? Okay. Next up is Don Talbot, the municipal auditor from Barry, Talbot, and Roya for talk about our FY 2014 audit report.
Well, good evening. We are pleased to report on the town of Boothbay's financial statements and tell you that the town has received unqualified opinion on its financial statements, which means that the statements are fairly stated in all material respects. Further, we didn't find any weaknesses in internal control that rose to the level of material weaknesses. We'll be discussing that a little further later on. This presentation will provide information for both 2013 and 2014 comparable in comparative format where it's applicable. This information is exerted from the financial statements. They are not the financial statements. It's just information that's taken from that. More of the important things that we want to discuss. So let's see here. Okay. What we have here from 2013 and 2014 are the cash and investments, taxes, receivables, and receivables, and other assets, comparing one year to the next. The majority of the, let's start with this one here. The significant changes in the general fund assets here is your cash, if you notice from one year to the next, is about $399,576 more in 2014 than in 2013. The balance of the outstanding personal property taxes decreased from the prior year. You see that? And then the balance of the outstanding liens increased by about $27,000 from 2013 to 2014. Other assets are slightly less than last year. Then there were no tax-acquired property on the books. The majority of the other assets, by the way, is made up of like fuel depot receivables, homestead exemption from the state of Maine, fuel inventory, things of that nature. On the general fund liabilities, what we find here is that the changes in accounts payable from one year to the next, and also with the accrued liabilities, just due to timing of the payments at year end, particularly accrued payroll. The amounts due to other funds from the general fund remain relatively unchanged from one year to the next. And that really represents the general fund that owes the TIF, the Almer Scholarship Fund. So that's what makes up the due to other funds. The cash is in the general fund, and it owes that to the TIF and the Almer Scholarship Fund. The general fund deferred inflows. The deferred inflows of resources decreased by about $35,355. $24,635 of decrease wasn't in what they call unavailable revenue. It's the 60-day rule. What it is that in governmental accounting, some years ago, municipalities were using fund balance a little bit more than they should have, actually, because it's not all cash. So they developed a 60-day rule, and basically what you do is any taxes that have not been received beyond 60 days after the end of your fiscal year gets taken from current receivables. Basically, it removes it from the revenue. By removing it from revenues, you're actually reducing the fund balance and makes it more conservative. You have a drop from one year to the next because the collection of receivables after 60 days increased. So the more revenue is going into the fund balance and less into the deferred. And then the other one's made up of property taxes that were collected in advance for 2015. Um, The long-term debt, how much, we have actually showed 3 years here. In 2013, it was $20,728, and this year was only $10,364, which is all current, which is probably paid by now. The state would allow a per capita debt of about $45,000, and your per capita debt is like $3.41, so you're in pretty good shape, at least as of 6/30, when it comes to the debt. That's why the state's in the pickle the way it is, huh? The general fund revenues, comparing budget to actual, you can see where the tax revenues exceeded the budget due to changes in the unavailable taxes and supplemental taxes. So that $27,400 represents some of that revenue that I mentioned, 60 days that you actually collected, plus some supplemental taxes. The tax collection rates are very good here. 97.7% of your taxes are collected, and that's pretty good. A lot of towns just have 93 or 94%, so you're doing really well. Excise tax collections came in better than expected by about 25%. Licenses and permits slightly under budget. State revenue sharing actuals were more than budgeted. Other intergovernmental was higher than budgeted due to receiving more local assistance and highway block grant. Changes for services is more than budget because of planning fees, appeal board fees, TV franchise fees. So the pie shape gives an idea where all your money's most of your money's coming from property taxes. Excise taxes being the second one, and it makes up the other ones. On the expense side, you have, it's kind of interesting the amount of where your expenses were under your budget by $215,000, and your revenues were above your budget by about $215,000. The general fund had a net savings due to part to a savings in building and code enforcement and administration lapses into fund balance. Public safety and services exceeded budget due to ambulance expense because of the hospital closure. Public works was over budget from road improvements and high snow removal last winter. Hopefully we won't have that this year. Who knows? Service accounts and insurance exceeded budget due to changes in budget lines, consolidated several lines from other budget areas for administrative and accounting ease, so it's ended up in the miscellaneous. And the transfer to the TIF district were slightly more than budgeted, by about $334. Let's see what else here. It kind of gives you an idea from a perspective of education. That's, I don't think surprises anyone, that's the biggest part of your budget. And fixed charges being the county tax and the overlay. So what all this means is this: when you look at your fund balance, you basically have where your revenues exceeded your budget by $215,000, actual revenues collected. Expenditures were under budget by $215,000. So you had, plus you have these net transfers of reserve that we have to count into this whole pot. Less what you expected to budget out of fund balance of $102,000 leaves you a net increase of $400,000 that you're adding to your fund balance this year. So you have your beginning fund balance of $664 with an ending balance of $1,064,000 when you take all this into consideration. It's impressive. It's a $400,000 increase. I know you have a fund balance policy and you're trying to build it up, so that's a good start.
How close are we to goal?
I believe the amount was like, what, 1 point something?
18.75 of the
budget.
appropriation.
Right.
This puts us about 55%.
Well, okay,
So
so,
well over?
no.
No, it puts us halfway.
So what's your,
55% of the 18%?
Yeah.
so your budget this year is what?
I don't know off the top of my
Okay,
head.
but, yeah, okay.
Total appropriation, yeah.
I mean, but it sounds like the goals, you want it to be close to 2 million.
About 1.5 is
You're
about
right,
where we
roughly
want.
1.5, and you're at 768,000.
And that 18% is essentially 1/4's worth of your expenditures, is
Right.
essentially what you want.
It's a big number, and we knew that that would be a big number and set the goal high.
We're close to 1.1 right now, after.
700 something.
768.
768.
I had to figure it out on one of my spreadsheets.
Yes.
So you showed us 1 million
Yeah, that's where.
last slide, and now it's only 760. How come?
No, that's the components of fund balance. Okay, the fund balance are, what you have are different categories, okay? You have the non-spendable, restricted, and unassigned. The non-spendable would be like, basically you take your fund balance, or the amount that we had, and we have to spread it out in those 3 categories that you have anyway. The restricted made up of the reserves, the Public Works Department equipment, Fire Department equipment, and capital reserves. There are no assigned. There's another one called assigned, and there's none there because the assigned means when you vote to take some money out of fund balance for the upcoming budget year, and you didn't do that, so you don't have any unassigned. You haven't allocated anything to the assigned fund balance. And of course, the unassigned is free and clear to use, for appropriations. Credit agencies look for a ratio of unassigned fund balance to the budget of approximately 20%. And we recommend somewhere between 16.67 to 18.75%, which is like 2 or 3 months of your operation expenditures. So, but you're on your way there. What we have to do, basically your financial statements are comprised of it looks like 2 financial statements really. You have your fund statements and you have what they call the government-wide. And the government-wide are basically taking your fund statements and converting them, if you will, to from a modified accrual of accounting basis of accounting to a full accrual basis of accounting, similar to what you see in a corporation, where you have your capital assets, you depreciate them, you bring in your note payables or your long-term debt. So this shows the bringing on your capital assets, if you will, and the components of it with the infrastructure, land, building improvements, and equipment. And so this is your composition of net assets, invested in capital assets, restricted and unrestricted, which is basically the statements on a full accrual basis of accounting. The restricted is composed of your TIF and your reserved amounts. Again, we arrive at these numbers by converting the fund accounting to full accrual. And so that takes into consideration those capital assets, the depreciation on those assets, and the long-term debt. So, you want to
Sure.
do the audit findings?
So, just to remind everybody, the purpose of an audit is for us to examine the accounting records and form an opinion on them, is to say whether or not they're fairly stated. Now, fairly stated means management has all of the information as far as the accounting information and the transactions that go in it. The board, who represents the citizens, they're responsible for making sure that the information that the town manager has is accurate, that he's not lying to you, that he's not misrepresenting something, saying you have more than what you have. And because the town managers don't really have the technical expertise, they invite an independent third party to come in and take a look. So the entire purpose of our audit is to determine whether or not what management is saying is actually fairly represented. So in doing so, we come up with a number of findings. First, what we do is we do a risk assessment to see where your high-risk areas are. We consider items like fraud or errors, how they might occur, and then we do our tests in order to determine whether or not, any of that is really, exceedingly high, which would mean that you have a high risk, and then we would have to kind of increase our level of testing. So I'm just going to go over some of the audit findings that we had. Overall, though, I just wanted to say that town staff has done a very good job of managing the books, especially compared to the last few years. The town managers have town management has come a long way in really improving their accounting records and their internal controls. We thank them for their assistance during the audit. They were very prompt. They were very helpful whenever we needed anything. Jim was right there. Tracy was right there, able to help us out. And so even though the next couple slides are talking about misstatements, I want to put it into a larger context that every audit you're going to have misstatements. And it's not, you know, oh, well, then this is a big area. If it were a really big area, I'd let you know. So these next misstatements are more of just areas that we found that could be improved in the following years as a type of continuous improvement to make sure that, you know, the books and the processes run as smoothly as possible. Really, we only found two major types of misstatements. The first was the town received some fire equipment that was donated, and that value wasn't brought into the accounting records. The reason is because the accounting records in the town is generally focused on a cash type of basis. We're really only concerned with, you know, what's going on in the immediate period, as opposed to an accrual basis is what you would find on a normal corporation. Plus, it also dealt with general capital assets, like which again are just full accrual. So it's not uncommon that towns kind of overlook that, and especially when it's donated and there's no cash transaction going on, it's not uncommon for it to be overlooked. So that's the reason for why it occurred. The impact on the financial statements, had it gone undetected, meaning had we not found it during the audit, it simply would have meant that your net position would have been understated by the net book value of those assets. So that was a bunch of equipment, like a tractor and some, you know, emergency equipment. It would simply have meant that your financial statements, you know, your net assets were, let's say, instead of $1 million, they were reported at $950,000. So not a major impact. It had no impact on your income or expenses, because when something like that is donated, the revenue is recorded and an offsetting expense for what would have been the expense is recorded. So there's no real net position. How can it be prevented in the future? Really just usually during an audit we make recommendations to town management. Basically keep better track of these types of donated assets. Kind of have it in the back of your mind when you get a donated asset that actually has some sort of financial impact on the town. The next misstatement that we saw was the due to and due from accounts were misstated, as were fund balances. The reason for this is because the way that the accounting software is currently set up is that everything is flowing through general funds. Or the general fund account, and you know, without getting too technical, basically you have to break up for government accounting. You have to break up the entire town into a series of funds, and each of those funds should have their own set of assets, liabilities, equity, revenue, and expenses, and they should all be self-balancing. And it's so that you can keep track of individual things. So if you want to keep track of the TIF, it should have its own assets and liabilities and revenues and expenses. If you want to keep track of a capital project that's going on, that should have its own set of accounts. The way the current accounting records are set up, because they're not a lot, the town doesn't have a lot of funds, and also just because, you know, it's really a technical accounting type of thing, they just run everything through the general fund. The problem with that is that you do run the risk of having errors in keeping track of those funds, because of the responsibility that the town has, that town management has for the citizens' assets, which is what these are, right?
Yes.
You should be tracking it or trying to reduce the chance of error as much as possible. So by not doing it with individual funds, you increase that risk. How can it be prevented in the future? Is just simply using the TRIO system, which is the accounting software, to set up individual funds for every single fund. And I've already talked with Jim about that, and it doesn't seem like there should be any major problem with doing that, especially given the fact that this town doesn't really have a lot of funds.
Question.
Yes.
Jim, we haven't changed the way, as far as this statement here, we're still doing business the same way we have been the last 2-3 years?
And no, he's talking about I'm not even sure if I can explain very well in this.
The reason I'm asking is I'm just trying to figure out why this misstatement hasn't been picked up in the last couple of audits.
Well, like I said, these are not misstatements in the sense that they're anything that is going to cause a material misstatement. Whenever we're doing audits, we're really looking for materiality. These are more of just, while they are misstatements, and we provide the town with adjustments, and the town accepts those, looks at those adjustments and they accept them or not. And Jim hasn't not accepted any of our adjustments. They're still technically misstatements. And so this is really just more of a kind of best practices thing. This is what if you want to continuously improve, if you want to make your accounting records smoother and operating more effectively, these are our recommendations. I mean, that's really what an audit is.
You really didn't answer my question.
Helping to look
My
at.
question is, if we've been doing the same thing for the last couple of years, why wasn't this picked up in the last couple of audits?
Well, I think in the past, we made adjustments and just not said anything about it. In other words, the due tos and due froms had to be adjusted, and we just did them.
Right.
And this time we felt that, we communicated that, and we thought we'd just communicate that with, to you as well. So it's not like it's the first time it happened.
It's
Right.
probably
Just that
the,
we kept quiet about it.
probably the best explanation is that our previous auditor would just do the adjustments. Since we brought on Barry, Talbot, and Royer, they would give us the pages of adjustments and we would do them. We've reduced those down to an acceptable amount of adjustments, and I think what the auditor is telling us now is that we could eliminate them if we institute some more changes.
I just asked moving forward, because I know you guys have done the last, 2 or 3 audits for us. If there are items like this moving forward, don't wait a couple of years. Let us know. Jim's very capable of fixing the situation.
Sure. Well, like I said, I mean, we find misstatements every year, and a lot of times it's really a question of how much of a practicality. But we can certainly, give you the full blast of things that we think could be improved. It's really then a question of how much is the practicality of it, the benefit, and based off of the cost. Is it going to take us a lot of time? Is it really worth training somebody new or training Tracy to update all of this information? I mean, it's not like for example, this one, setting up new accounting or setting up new funds, it's not like it's, well, I'm just going to go in and type in new funds. I mean, you really have to go back to the beginning of the year and keep track. So by the time we get here in November, you've already had June, July, August, September, and October transactions that are running through those that you have to go back and say, okay, well, we recorded it here in this general fund.
Well, I'm just
Now-
saying, as the layman who relies on the auditors to let us know what's going on,
Yep.
please don't wait in the future. If you see something,
Sure.
don't hold back.
Yes, okay. So, again, that's how we can prevent this in the future or improve it in the future. Weakness in internal controls is mentioned at the outset. We found no material weaknesses in internal controls. Now, that's not to be interpreted as that there are no weaknesses in your internal controls. There's just none that we detected that rose to a level of what we call material weakness. A material weakness is a deficiency or a combination of deficiencies in internal control that there's a reasonable possibility that a material misstatement of the entity's financial statements will not be prevented or detected and corrected on a timely basis. So given that materiality level, a materiality level is an error that to the average user of the financial statement will make an influence on their economic decisions. We detected no weaknesses that rose to that level that would say, okay, well, this internal control that you have, it's likely that it's going to cause material misstatement to go undetected or to go unprevented. But again, I want to emphasize that it doesn't mean that there are no weaknesses in internal control, just none that rise to this level. Other general observations. Again, I just point out here that the accounting software can be better utilized to keep track of the fund activities. And then the second one, the transactions pertaining to the First Congregational Church had a lack of controls, and I say had because by the time, we're doing this presentation, the First Congregational Church is no longer, the town is no longer doing the agency fund or the fiduciary funds that it was doing for it. And the reason for that is because we had talked to Jim about it during our audits, and we mentioned, hey, there's not a lot of controls in this area. And apparently he talked to them and they didn't want to deal with that, so they're doing it on their own.
Yeah, we've discussed previously that this is a community resources account, that we said that they could comply with our general, the rest of our budget process, or the rest of our processes, our fund processes, or they could leave the town, and they had decided that they didn't want to go through the warrant process, so it fixed itself.
Right. So essentially, that was one of our observations that has already been changed. And I believe that is it. Are there any other questions?
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Did you give a letter that identified the specific changes to the accounting system that could be implemented? And did you give a letter that identified, although not material, the weaknesses that should be addressed to strengthen the system even more?
Yes, we provide, there's required communications for audits. One is called a SAS 114 letter, and the other is a SAS 15 letter, a 115 letter. Those are both addressed to the town council. The first one talks about all of the aspects of the audit. First, it talks about our responsibility and management's responsibility, talks about any issues that we found during the audit, which we didn't find any, meaning issues with management or any disagreements that we've had with management. It also talks about any sort of significant estimates that management might make. With a town, there's not, or especially with this town, there's not significant estimates. In that letter, we did mention that depreciation is an estimate that can have an effect on the town's net assets, but it's not an uncommon estimate. Every entity has to make an estimate for depreciation. And on top of that, part of our testing is to just recalculate that estimate to make sure that it's reasonable. As far as the 115 letter is concerned, the two misstatements that I mentioned here are mentioned in the 115 letter. The misstatement dealing with the not bringing on the donated asset, and then the misstatement that come with the due to, due from accounts. So both of those have been communicated in letters.
What I was getting at, are there specific changes to the accounting system that you'd like to see implemented to do better on the funds issue? And are there specific statements as to what the changes should be to the process that, although not material, could be improved?
No, those aren't written. Those are usually, if they don't rise to a level where they're significant enough, usually those are worked out with management, and the communications are usually done orally. When it comes to actually implementing these changes, management usually consults with us and asks us, okay, well, when you say that you want us to implement the fund balance, more funds, how do we do that? Then we do that, usually free of charge. The management is always, not always, but throughout the year will contact us, say, hey, we're trying to do what you said that you wanted us to do. This is how we're doing it. Does it make sense that we're doing it this way? Is this the right way that we're doing it? And we usually give our opinion on that, whether or not they're doing it the right way. But no, that's not that. The specific details are not written unless there's a request for it, unless management really needs a
Given
request.
your concerns, I would suggest that this might be a good year to get those specifics, because what he's saying is they're not hard changes to make, and they're not major things to address, so why not address them specifically, so that next year when he comes in 9 months down the road, we're doing better already. It's an easy thing from an accounting standpoint.
Yep. We can do that if you want. Would you like a written,
Procedure steps?
yeah, procedure steps on how to do it, or essentially specifically what we're looking that the board could have as a written statement? We can certainly do that.
Please.
And have you started? You've started to make the changes already?
We haven't. No, not in terms of these funds that we're talking about. Really, they're very small in the scope of of the finances of the town, so they've been a lower priority. And you can remember over the last couple of years, we've made some very large changes, so I'm actually very happy with the findings as, in comparison to the findings of the last few years.
Yeah, and I'm gonna kind of inject here, because I think I'm gonna touch on what Chuck was talking about earlier. Over the past 2 years, I think it's been, maybe 3, that you have actually been doing our audit. The last few were less than impressive, to say the least, and they were a little bit more hard to listen to than this one tonight. I think, and please correct me if I'm stating or overstating, I think that we had higher priorities in past years, so those were the ones they were triaging. We gotta take care of this stuff first, we'll work our way down, and now we're down kind of to the little stuff. And I'm okay with the little stuff, and I mean, the big changes have been made over the past couple of years, so these audits get better and better and better. So now we're down to the little things. I have no doubt with the big things that we've changed over the past few years, this shouldn't be much of a change in-house at this point in time.
Yeah, I think the town should be commended for the progress it's made in the last few years.
I do too. Yeah. So I've enjoyed listening to this audit. This has been fairly painless.
Anything else?
You have to get nitpicky to find this stuff, right?
Well, yeah, and that's really what it is. It's not.
They wouldn't be doing the job if they weren't finding anything.
That's right.
The bottom
Well,
line
either
is,
that or you're perfect, in which case then I have to reassess my risk and go, did I really assess that risk right the first time around?
compared to where we were 2 years ago, and Jim's plan of building the undesignated fund, and we all said, well, we'll believe it when we see it. Well, we added 330,000 to it this year. That's pretty aggressive, so it's nice to see that. I think that Jim needs to be commended on that.
I agree.
Anything else for these folks?
I think Don and his crew has added a heightened level of professionalism and a very heightened level of scrutiny of our books, so we always appreciate it. Makes us better.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Can we give them just a minute to?
Yes.
I
Can't get rid of this scratchy cough.
When you offered me that, I went, where am I?
Hey, Sally.
Hi, Sally. Squeeze in, can you?
Yeah, no problem.
The audience are actually pretty comfortable.
Great.
Yeah.
I thought the same thing.
They had bigger things.
So you can see we've been working on finances for a couple of years,
Don't get me wrong, I agree with what you're saying.
Oh, I
where my hairline went.
Isn't it fun? I don't care.
What you have to do?
I know. I used to do it for Eric all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there are going to be a lot more people here.
I think some of them will be fine.
I remember.
Safe travels.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Next on the agenda is to consider a resolution of the pending litigation, Mariner Tower 2 LLC versus the town of Boothbay, pursuant to the terms of the proposed consent order.
So as per our discussions that we've had in executive session with our attorney, who's here tonight, you can see that we have a proposed consent agreement or consent order with you and some proposed adoption resolution language if you so choose.
Comments?
Anything out there?
Does anybody care to speak to this?
I
Just
understand,
say your name just for Channel 7, Scott.
I understand the situation you guys are in, and I understand the concerns and the pros and cons. There's two things about this that I find that may not work out. One is, the lease is for 50 years, if they want it to be for 50 years. And I've read a number of articles about how they price these towers out as far as selling. But also, as I recall, the lease, they can do anything they want with it, transfer it to another owner, sell it, etc. But a lot of these leases tend to be in 5-year renewals. And that's because technology changes very quickly. And my question is, I didn't see anything in the consent that didn't indicate you were accepting the lease as it was provided to the Spaldings. It would seem to me it would be wise if there was a trigger mechanism, let's say 5 or 10 years, that they would have to come back and justify the continuation of the tower based on the current status of telecommunications. Because it could very well be that their problem has gone away with different satellite issues and stuff like that, where they don't need these towers. So my main concern with what I'm reading into that consent is there's no automatic ability to terminate that tower standing there and have it taken down as long as they're marketing and prove to you that they're marketing. And I would suggest that a lot of these things across the country have done either 5 or 10-year renewals where they have to come forward and justify the continued use of the tower. That'd be the one thing that I would suggest you put in there. Especially since now that this looks like it's going to be granted, you might as well look for 2 or 3 more coming down the line, because they admitted they can't cover their need over there without 2 or 3 more towers. So there's going to be more, which means anytime that they want a tower now, you're not going to be able to turn them down. So I think this first variance and the first conditions you put on this are going to be very, very critical to what comes next. So I really suggest that one change, and that is either a 5-year renewable with their coming forward and proving to you that they still need it, given the state of technology. If they do that, it's renewed. But if not, then it can come down. Otherwise, you're going to have something to be standing there for 50 years, even though it's hardly being used, but they're telling you it's marketed. That's my only comment.
Well, I guess my question becomes, are we at the 11th hour? I mean, can wording be changed at this point in time, or does it, or not?
Well, like, can you, I know the conversation that I had with you on Friday, we are at the 11th hour.
That's what I
Yeah,
thought.
if you'd like, I can tell you where Mariner Tower 2 is, and they have basically said, this is take it or leave it. They are not willing, they agreed to a large number of conditions that they were not really very happy about, and they even agreed to pay $2,500 worth of the town's attorney's fees, which is pretty extraordinary. And I had spoken with the attorney for Mariner Tower 2, and he basically said, this is it. It's either this deal or no conditions whatsoever. We're going back to court, and we'll have the court impose this use variance on the town with none of these conditions that they have agreed to.
Sally, Mariner Tower 2 has agreed in this consent agreement to even more restrictions than the tower company that put the tower up on the corner of 27 and River Road, correct?
Correct.
I would love nothing more than to go to court and win. But what I don't want to do is go to court and spend the taxpayers' dollars and lose. And I do not believe that we have a case, from everything that I've read, there's been 3 experts the town has hired 2 to go down there and say that it's not adequate. So I can't see going to court, spending taxpayers' dollars for nothing.
Have you consulted any other lawyers throughout the country that have litigated these things with conditions such as ours?
No, but
Because it's Maine and this part of the country is unique in the fact that we've got so many valleys and coasts. It really hasn't been tested. Unfortunately, I speak for myself now, but from the get-go, we were told that we couldn't win this case. And that was made fairly obvious, in my opinion, at both appeals boards meetings. So Mariner Tower knew pretty much what our hand was, and that we were shaking our boots the whole time. You don't negotiate from a position of strength on it, and I appreciate the 11th hour, and I kind of figured that. But we took a hell of a lot of evidence. We didn't litigate, but we found enough holes in their argument, enough questions, given what we were told is the background. We think there's a reasonable belief that you can't have perfect coverage everywhere. And matter of fact, I don't think any of you were at the second meeting. they admitted that they weren't even gonna cover the majority of what they said they needed to cover by the tower where it is. So you're gonna get 2 or 3 more of these. But unfortunately, you're negotiating from a very bad position because we were told from the get-go, we couldn't win this, we couldn't win this. Well, that's not the way you sit down and negotiate. So I appreciate your situation, but, and it's an unfortunate situation that you are at the 11th hour. And I think you're gonna be stuck with this, and you're gonna be stuck with the same conditions on the next 2 towers that they asked for.
In my view, these conditions are good for the town of Boothbay, so I don't think that's a matter of being stuck with these conditions. These are conditions that Mariner Tower 2 has agreed to that are in the town's favor. They didn't have to do 90% of what's on this list of conditions.
And you started with the conditions that were placed on the previous tower company, and Mariner Tower 2 has agreed to even more restrictions than they did.
That's correct.
You started with the premise we couldn't win the case, so we had to give the variance. That's the premise we started with, in reality.
Just state your name, please.
Pete Brown, I live on Ocean Point. They've been declined, but they've been, it's said no 2 or 3 times. Why does it suddenly gonna happen?
Because the Board of Appeals, in their opinion, could not rule on that because it is not in our ordinance.
It is, yeah, but it's zone, not.
I understand, but the Federal Communications Law of 1996
You got it.
says otherwise.
Yeah, right.
If we wanted to test the waters and go to federal court and fight it, and spend at a minimum $100,000 of taxpayer dollars to see if we could win, which our lawyer is advising us our chances are slim and none, we could. But I can't see spending that kind of money for a case you aren't going to win.
So, but they just said that's gonna happen, it doesn't actually happen.
Oh, no, they filed suit in federal court. Yes. This right here, this consent agreement will stop that if we do this tonight.
So,
And the thing is, too, if this goes to court and we lose, the judge isn't gonna put any restrictions on it. He's just gonna say, build your tower. By reaching a consent agreement with them, we're able to put restrictions on them that's good for the town.
Get a little control.
I mean, a couple of things that come to mind on, as far as things we put on there. We've got a spot on the tower for emergency communication. If the fire department or law enforcement ever
Repeater.
wanted space on the tower, they have it. There is money put in a bond in case they walk away. It renews every 5 years.
Correct, the
It
removal bond.
increases
Yes.
so much percent every 5 years. In case they walk away from it, we have money to remove that tower, so we're not stuck with an eyesore. I don't remember what else.
Taxpayers wouldn't have to pay to take it down.
Right. Frank?
Were they told, was Mariner told that they meet these requirements that the town would grant?
What do you mean?
Well, you've given this list of conditions.
This is a negotiated consent order, so they've in principle agreed that if we sign this, they'll sign this. It is an agreement put before the board.
When the consent agreement was put together, I assume it was mutual, it was put together. Was a list given to them saying, okay, this is what we want.
Yes.
Yes.
If you sign, if this is all right with you, then we'll do it.
And they took pretty much every single thing that we put on our
Gave us
list.
almost everything we wanted.
Except for asking them to pay for all of our lawyers' fees. They didn't want to do that.
Okay, but I mean, so if you said, if you do this, we'll do this, I mean, they've done it. I mean, I'm not pro or against, I'm just saying that if you negotiated it in good faith and they met it, then, I think,
I think I can say that none of us sitting up here are very happy about the fact that federal law can trump local law.
yeah.
But we have to do what, in our opinion, is best for the town.
Absolutely.
And going to court is not.
Call compromise.
Right.
But doesn't there have to be a reason to do it? I mean, is it just because some people want to?
No, there is a reason.
Yeah.
The federal telecommunications law trumps local law. So even though Mariner Tower 2,
Somebody wants better service or for emergency purposes, I mean, there has to be, otherwise they could put a thing in.
Yeah, we had there was 3 experts that was hired, 2 by the town and
Three
1 by
engineering firms.
Mariner Tower, that said that there is a need.
Right.
you can't argue an expert. I mean, I can walk around with a cell phone, and if I can make a phone call, then I could argue that case. I'm not an expert. The experts that were,
What I'm wondering is the need for emergency purposes, if it's because you weren't better, you get a dial. What is the need is because?
I don't think it's a need so much as we can't hinder. I mean, you could probably say it better than I could, Sally.
The Federal Telecommunications Act, which is a federal statute, it basically says that a town can't prohibit or take any action that has the effect of prohibiting personal wireless services. And so what the Board of Appeals initially got to look at, and what the selectmen are now dealing with, is the denial of a use variance going to have the effect of prohibiting wireless telecommunication services for Mariner Tower 2. And there were, as the chairman indicated, there were 3 different radio frequency experts involved in this matter. One that was hired by AT&T, and 2 that were hired by the town of Boothbay. And all 3 experts indicated that there is a gap in coverage as far as AT&T service goes. And so the question is, will the denial of the use variance have the effect of prohibiting wireless telecommunication services for AT&T? And I think 3 different experts have said yes. And Mariner Tower 2 also looked at alternative locations, and every location that the Board of Appeals suggested, and others, and at different heights at these different locations. And a gap in coverage was demonstrated, and the lack of another viable alternative site was also established by Mariner Tower 2. So it's an issue of the Federal Telecommunications Act is basically trumps local zoning if the local zoning ordinance provision, which in this case is the provision in the special residential zoning district regulations that says you can't have a telecommunications in that zoning district. Well, if the denial of a use variance has the effect of denying personal wireless services for AT&T, then that's a situation where federal law is going to trump the local town of Boothbay zoning ordinance. And what the selectmen have been faced with is the issue of, do they fight this litigation, which, again, the town doesn't have a very good case factually, and, you could probably hire, a lot more experts, but I think we've already got 3 who said there's a gap in coverage. I don't think that's going to change. And selectmen are dealing with a situation of, do they litigate this and likely lose and spend money on a loser, or do they negotiate with Mariner Tower 2, which they have decided to do, and they have negotiated a very, nice set of conditions that the developer has agreed to. And so that's in not just the town's interest, it's in the neighbor's interest. I mean, if this matter doesn't get resolved through this consent order, then Mariner Tower 2 will continue to litigate, the town will continue to spend money and likely lose, and the town will end up with this tower being built on the Spalding site with none of these conditions. So it is in the town's and the neighbor's interest to agree to this. And as I said earlier, this is it. And this process has been going on, this lawsuit was filed back in February or March, and there have been discussions along the way about possible resolution of the litigation, but the Mariner Tower 2 has come to the Board of Appeals twice now. The second time they came because the Board of Appeals had, during the first application process, said, well, why don't you look at the Spalding site? Mariner Tower 2 did exactly what the Board of Appeals wanted Mariner Tower 2 to do. That was to look at the Spalding site. Mariner Tower 2.
Hold on.
Complete misrepresentation of the Board of Appeals. Why didn't it get accepted the first time then?
That's the, question for the Board of Appeals.
The Board of Appeals felt that it was not in their jurisdiction to go outside of the ordinance. The ordinances are black and white, and their opinion was that they could not go outside of them ordinances. Am I?
Can I explain it?
Absolutely.
As your chairman, I'd like to explain how we got to this point. We were asked to grant a variance to the power company. The ordinances say this is a prohibited use in that area. The state gives us criteria of how we can grant a variance.
we didn't feel they met the criteria. We never made any suggestions or conditions. We just said, we looked at all the facts, a lot of things were thrown at the wall. We looked at it and said, this is how we feel. The ordinances are, they don't, it's a prohibited use, and the variances, the criteria variances weren't met. And both times we heard that, we felt that. So that's how we ended up with this. You guys were able to negotiate a good thing for the town and for the people, and that's wonderful. My suggestion in the future, going forward, is to prohibit this happening again, is this ordinance, this Federal Communication Act has been since 1996. We've had 3 ordinance changes. The language allowing this towers not to be used in certain areas still is in our ordinances. I highly recommend that you go to the voters this year and have it so that communication towers are legal in all parts of the town, and then applications go to the planning board who can negotiate with future tower companies. There are going to be more of them. We know that for a fact.
I agree with you
We
entirely.
did the best we could do with what we had. The ordinance was prohibited. The variances, we didn't feel they met the criteria.
Well, the reality of it is, I don't think there's a one of us that doesn't agree with what you just said about needing to get something in. I think that would be,
That's where we are.
I agree.
Right.
I agree. Fran, you've had your hand up a while, I'm sorry.
First, I want to commend the appeals board for the decision that they made. They really had no choice on it. I've gone through the consent agreement and looked at all of the conditions that are listed there, and they're all good, great conditions. So again, Sally, the writing on that, that's to be commended. However, Dickey makes a good point. We need to address it from a planning board perspective, and the way to do that is to allow towers, communication towers, in every district, but to have in our ordinance what those conditions are. Now, all of those conditions that are in the consent agreement are conditions that were pointed out in a document that was produced by G. Reese Gibson and others in the committee, along with a lot more other conditions that will protect the town insofar as when, and I don't want to say when or if a tower goes in, when another tower goes in, because that tower is not going to provide ubiquitous service for that area, that we have conditions in place that say, here's what you're going to have to do to satisfy the planning board that we are protecting the town to the highest level we possibly can, knowing that if this ends up in court, we'd lose anyway. But all of these conditions that we put in are conditions that would benefit us insofar as the aesthetics of it, the placement of the tower, the transmission capabilities of the tower, the sharing of use on the tower, so that you're not going to get an AT&T tower and a singular tower side by side. And so anyway, yeah, Dickey points out exactly right. We need to address this from a planning board perspective. We do have a good document to start as a reference point on it, and I'm not certain that it's something that should wait until we're doing a wholesale change as a result of the comprehensive plan.
I agree, I think it needs to happen quicker. I agree.
It should be ready for May.
The length of the lease of the tower, and so that if that's a condition, they have to meet that, where they have to renew it every 5 years or something.
Exactly.
I actually would almost, I mean, we're kind of digressing from what we, but, I mean, it would be nice to have any Board of Appeals member or two, knowing what you've run into with the history, along with the planning board, to craft something up, because, I mean, we don't want to be put in this position again. By no means.
We want to have something that we can put to the voters in May.
The other thing we want to do is get the town in a mess, but we understand what you've got.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think this is the best outcome.
Well, what we do in the future and what we do right now are two different things. You guys need the ammunition so that you can handle this rather than ourselves.
Gene?
Yep.
Jean Reese Gibson, East Boothbay. I wasn't going to say a word tonight, but after what Fran has said, I really do have to say something. Thank you, Fran, for speaking up. Does anybody remember June of 2013, when the committee came to the Board of Selectmen and predicted everything that has now taken place and asked the board to please act promptly to avoid it, and you decided it wasn't worth the time and effort at that point. Now, all of a sudden, you're congratulating each other for putting in conditions that could have gone into the ordinance at the time that the ordinance was being reviewed prior to the town meeting to vote on the ordinance. It all could have been done in an orderly fashion, and all of this effort and time and money and heartache could have been avoided. Forgive me for saying we told you so. I thought to myself I wouldn't say that, but I just can't help myself. Take a look at that tape from that meeting and you'll just be floored. I hope that if a committee of individuals comes to this board again so sincerely wishing to solve a problem, that they will be confronted with people who are a bit more receptive and a bit more circumspect as to what they have to say, the effort that they were willing to put into this. We volunteered to help, and we were never contacted. The matter was never taken up. And now, aren't we all happy with ourselves that we managed to negotiate what we didn't need to do in the first place?
Can I step in for a second, Steve?
Sure.
I appreciate your statements there, Ms. Gibson, but they're not looking at the whole picture. The whole picture is that over the last few years, the planning board has been asked and have done quite a few changes to our zoning ordinance. And much like the discussion we had with the auditor, we have triaged a lot of situations. And at that point in time, cellular towers wasn't the most important thing to the town. They were to the area and your group. And I think if that group was large enough, I think the selectmen would have acted on it. But at the time, we were having a lot of trouble getting the planning board to institute some changes in a very complicated zoning ordinance. That has not changed. We still have a complicated zoning ordinance. We still are trying to review and rewrite sections of that. And the best place to start is through a comprehensive planning process, which is underway and has been underway for the last 2 years. So don't put the cart before the horse. Make rational decisions, and moratoriums on cellular towers from a minority of people in the Boothbay was a rash decision.
I must respond to that as well, because that discussion in June of 2013 went beyond the request for a moratorium. It segued into a discussion as to whether or not there was a need to quickly address the ordinance, even without a moratorium. We went beyond that and said, even if you don't decide to do a moratorium, we still feel there is time to address this prior to the town meeting on the revised ordinances. And the final word from that board was, we don't see the need. I'm quoting, we don't see the need. That was the point at which I said, I can see this is going nowhere. And I'm quoting myself, I can see this is going nowhere, and I sat down. We can all learn from this. We don't have to be angry with each other about it. We don't have to be even regretful it's water under the bridge, but we can learn from this. And all I'm saying is, next time somebody comes and says, Houston, we have a problem, maybe we can listen a little harder and maybe work together a little better.
So then let me be the first to say, Houston, we have a problem. We need to work on our zoning ordinance.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. This gentleman first, then I'll get you.
Steve, I'm Bob Foss, Oakland County Regional Planning Commission. I'm not here for this purpose, but I would be happy to work with the planning board. I've reviewed towers and written tower ordinances for other towns. And under the existing contract, the county would be happy to do no cost to the town.
Thank you.
Just had the planning board get in touch with me.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I have gone through the town report and compared dwelling assessments in parts of the town that people I know. And in the special residential unit, the estimates for taxes are anywhere from 25 to 40% higher than other parts of the town. Do my taxes get reduced because you turn it into a commercial? Because planning board has already turned it commercial, and now you're gonna do it again.
It's not commercial, though.
Yes, it is. Across the street from me, I got a guy storing dirt.
No, but-
Against the number two. The planning board said you can do it because corruption has to be, because I give you three instances. A boatyard on River Road, they shut down after 32 years because somebody from New Hampshire was spending some day and they made noise. Down the street from me, a guy built a small office building and wanted to do financial advisement, and they made him take the sign down. And across the street from me, Pat Farron is storing dirt, which is against the the residential ordinance. And you get out there, he doesn't crush rocks there anymore, he used to, but now he's got, I guess they call it, I don't know, a shaker or whatever, and it makes as much noise. So, you know, we're being screwed, and nobody does anything about it. That's not, the planning board is corrupt.
Planning board wouldn't have anything to do with enforcement.
They said he could put his dirt there. If you read the thing for special residential, no storing of gravel, sand, and construction material. He's doing it constantly. Besides, my tax on my house is $136,700, and he's got two of his kids living there, for a total cost of $15,800 for residential tax.
They're living there?
He has two of his sons and their significant others living in two buildings with a combined tax rate of $15,800. And I'm paying almost 10 times that much.
Me either.
I just,
It's worth looking into, absolutely.
Look at the town report. It's in there, that's what I go with.
Have you brought this to the attention of the assessor?
What's that?
Have you brought this to the attention of the assessor?
What good does it do?
Well, that is the proper way to do it.
That is, you know, they say you can do it. You know, the planning board, oh, go ahead, you know, you can sue X amount of stuff. You know, as far as I'm concerned, it's, you know, don't always, my wife doesn't come, because she had 2 heart attacks and 2 strokes in the last 2.5 years, and this would drive her out of her mind, she'd have another stroke. That's the way she was coming.
My recommendation, assessing issues bring to the assessor and enforcement issues bring to the code enforcement. I'm sure they'll be taken care of.
Anybody else?
You're welcome.
Motion?
Absolutely.
I motion that the board settle the pending litigation Mariner Tower 2 LLC versus Town of Boothbay pursuant to the terms of proposed consent order, and authorize and direct the town attorney to take any and all action necessary on behalf of the town to finalize such settlement.
second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Can we give Sally a minute to vacate, because I don't think she wants to hang out with us any longer?
While we're on new business, I would like to see us push that to the planning board to get something drafted. You guys... have been hanging. Good night. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Next on the agenda is the Selectmen's meeting schedule. That falls on Christmas Eve in December is the one you want to talk about, correct?
Well, there's a couple of dates that I wanted to bring up. Douglas was in the office earlier today, and he said he had a conflict with November 26th, which would be our regularly next scheduled meeting. I wanted to see if you guys wanted to accommodate Douglas's family schedule. And then the next meeting that we have, the second meeting that we have in December falls on Christmas Eve. And I'm not sure if you guys want to meet on that date.
I recommend going to one meeting a month, unless something pressing comes up.
Yeah, I agree. We just meet the 10th of December. That will be our only meeting between now and the end of the year.
I've already incorporated into my plans, they're just meeting once in December, so it's okay with me. If we completely cancel the December 24th meeting, we'll make appropriate precautions, not much happens.
Is there anything pressing in November for the 26th?
We have actually scheduled a couple of Wharves and Weirs, and we posted them as such, so it would be a little difficult for us to change those. I've lined up our assessor to come in and deliver our new tax maps for you guys that day, but we can always reschedule that. It's, the big thing is the Wharves and Weirs that we've already posted.
You want it north? Yep. So, can we do it, well, there'll be, as long as we know that the three of us will be here. If you're not gonna be here and Chuck is not gonna be able to make it, we can do the Wharves and Weirs. I mean, we kinda can't change that date now that it's been advertised,
I'm okay with it.
correct?
I'm definitely allowed to be,
We've advertised when they are at the site. We've advertised,
I don't know.
And it says it'll be continued at the following meeting.
Right.
We advertise the
November
site
26th.
meeting, we advertise the selectmen's meeting, so we do have to have a public hearing. I mean, we could cancel it, but, you know, it's pain.
If they're waiting to go to work on the dock project.
We've already published it. is
Could
what
we
it
hold
says.
off the assessors maps for December and just do the bare minimum of the Wharves and Weirs, and if there's anything that comes up, but other than that, we'll just have a quick meeting and,
Yeah.
because it's just gonna be the three of us at the best.
Yes, but I still think the assessment maps is a good thing to do at this time, because it feeds into a part of my budget that I'm gonna give you in the next meeting, so.
Yeah, but wouldn't it make sense to have all five of us here to,
It would, but it's gonna be on film, so, you know, we kind
we could
of,
always do that in a workshop.
yep, certainly. And I could always have Mike come on the first meeting in December if I didn't ask him about it, I asked him about his availability, the week of Thanksgiving, and he said he was fine with moving around.
If we did it the following week, the Wednesday evening, the December 3rd or something, just as a workshop kind of thing to meet with him. That way you'd have all of us here. Are you gonna be here, Douglas? The 3rd?
Oh, yeah.
December 3rd?
I'm just
Does
going,
that sound?
I'm going to Vermont for Thanksgiving.
You get to look
Okay.
at everything that I have on my schedule, because I just threw out my calendar. Just so that, that's January. So December,
Mm-hmm. December 3rd, that works.
okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
So December 3rd, have a workshop,
right.
and then the 10th, we'll have our regular meeting, and we're off on December 24th.
Yep.
Does anybody really want to meet on December 24th?
Santa Claus.
December 3rd, if it's just a workshop, how about 5 o'clock?
Absolutely.
Fine with me.
At 5 PM?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay,
Good idea.
that would be more convenient.
Yep.
okay.
I think Board of Selectmen meeting would be a lot more convenient
I
too.
know. I-
Battle for another day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay with all meetings being at about noon.
Yeah.
I realize noon might be a little bit of a push, but 5 or 6 wouldn't be too bad,
We'd be like the commissioners do at 9 o'clock in the morning. No one would ever come.
like on a Wednesday.
Yes, but we believe in transparency.
Oh, I
We want-
agree. I said that tongue in cheek.
Yeah, I did too.
So, next up on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the previous meeting from 10/22/2014.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and second. Any comments, corrections? All those in favor? Douglas abstained because he wasn't
I
here.
wasn't here.
You skipped over a bunch of new business.
It's all right, I was
Whoops, I'm sorry.
You did too.
I apologize. We'll go back.
executive privilege.
Clifford Park redevelopment plan.
Can we do in order, Boothbay Harbor Economic Development?
Why did I not see that?
Okay.
A long day.
Mr. Vice
Well,
Chairman,
you're
please take over.
You're going in a different direction
I
now.
apologize.
He got really excited over the audit. I understand, I do as well.
I've had a long day of training. I've been sitting in classrooms all day, so.
So in your packets is the memorandum of agreement that you guys saw at the joint economic development workshop we had with Boothbay Harbor. It says draft at the top, MOA. On your desks, when you came in, you saw a similar variation of the same agreement that we've incorporated some of Sally's markups. It really, and all the markups are not substantive. They're really just trying to clear up a document. So what I would be soliciting is what I put in my memo is, I think that if the selectmen agree with essentially the agreement, to give authority to the chairman to sign the agreement with and make any reasonable adjustments at our next economic development meeting so that we can discuss some of the little things that we've twisted and turned.
I had sent you a list of questions.
Yes. And I, although I didn't bring, I thought the list of questions was to the Board of Selectmen, so I didn't really address them. I thought we would address them tonight. Do you want me to bring that email up?
Please. Some of it was just wording.
We get to read all your email.
Cool. Is there anything good in it? Okay. So, the questions were why 10 members? Split tie votes. I mean, that was a discussion amongst the group that night that you weren't there. I don't know if anybody else wants to get into why. I think it's a matter of if you have a tie, you don't move on. You have to convince one side or the other, so that you can't push a majority. I think that's the discussion, if I represented it right, Bob. The way A reads, 2 selectmen from each town would be appointed. Yeah, I don't think that is the intent, is 2 selectmen. I think
the intent was 1 from each town, but the way that's written,
Yeah.
right.
You might think it would mean 2, rather than 1 in the town manager.
Right. What is the right criteria for serving? We discussed that at the meeting, is that we do have an administrative code that essentially would say that I wouldn't be able to serve on that. It says no staff, and that's something we're gonna have to reconcile amongst ourselves.
Right.
We discussed at the joint meeting that it probably isn't a discussion to have with Boothbay Harbor, it's a discussion that we need to have amongst ourselves. Is that appropriate?
I look at this economic development committee where it's with both towns, it's the same as the task force, where we had 1 member from each town. You served as staff for the task force. Why wouldn't you be able to serve as staff and be an ex officio member, as is pointed out, that way?
I'm not lobbying for either way. This is
No,
like-
I'm just,
This is language that was discussed. Obviously, if the Board of Selectmen wants me as a supportive staff member, I'm a supportive staff member. If you want me as a voting member, I'll be a voting member. Either way, I think it's a great attempt at trying to put together a joint economic development committee.
honestly, just from my point of view, I think that both town managers should be the ex officio members from
That's the
Boothbay and
intent,
Boothbay
yeah.
Harbor.
Yes.
Yep.
Do I think we should have a vote? No, sorry, but I think that should be left up to the 10 members. But I do think that the town managers should be the ex officio members.
Yeah, much like what I discussed with the task, when the task force moved on to be in the Health and Wellness Foundation, and they asked me if I wanted to be a board member, and I asked if Chuck was gonna be a board member, and they said yes. I said, I'm not necessarily comfortable being in situations where I have an equal vote as one of the Board of Selectmen. So I reiterate that, but it's up to you guys. Now, where does the funding from the committee to start come from? That's currently not budgeted. It's not budgeted in FY15. It would have to be something that we'd start in FY16. And at that meeting, I volunteered to go through and find out what similar type towns are doing for economic development budgets and funding, so that we could come back to the joint group and decide what is a fair amount and how do we split it and how do we put that in our budget process.
So we all know that these things are coming, we just don't know how to answer the same questions that you have. We have the same questions, we don't have the answers for them yet.
I'm gonna take down my email because I think I sent my wife some pictures or something. I didn't.
As long as you don't send it to the cloud.
It's in the cloud. I think all of the changes that we're talking about are not substantive. I would like to see the board give permission to the chair to sign. Obviously, the chair is responsible enough to not sign if we just change it all up. But it would be nice to walk into that meeting that we're gonna have with Boothbay Harbor, and if they're ready to sign, we are too.
I just have one more question, and remembering what some of the comments that were made when we were all going through the TIF discussion the first time. I know this isn't going to be very popular, but is the committee going to be having a staff person, i.e. an economic development director? Because, as you guys know, I'm not for creating new positions. Contracted, like the comp plan has with Mark Ironman, that's one thing, but a staff person, especially where you're dealing with two different towns, can get a little sticky.
I think the reality of it is, if there was going to ever be a staff person, it's not in the crystal ball right now. That's looking, in a perfect world that we brought all kinds of businesses in and everything, absolutely. That's in a perfect world, but, I think contracted is what the conversations I remember.
Right, the discussion we had last time was we were gonna bring in some kind of an advisor, whether it be a firm or whatever the case may be, and that's what's gonna start laying kind of drawing the map of where we need to get, and that map may sometime down the road show a person, a staff member, but that's down the road, it's not anything that I don't see anything in the next few years by any means.
I can see the Economic Development Committee outgrowing a town function and becoming what bread used to be, only a bigger process.
I agree.
Then they could hire their own
Right.
staff person.
Right. I agree.
Yeah, it might, and I couldn't agree more. I can see us having a conversation with the founders of Bread and trying to use that vessel with some municipal funding to try to get some economic development done, and you'd have the opportunity to do public and private financing into that joint economic development committee. I think what if I try to encapsulate the discussion is we're trying to figure out how do we get started, and probably the best thing, and we discussed it that night, was to hire a consultant to sit with this joint economic development committee to work on the plan. One of the things that I'm doing for trying to come up with what a budget figure is to talk with Planning Decisions, who we're very familiar with. Frank O'Hara, who is the president of Planning Decisions, is actually probably one of the best in the state at doing these types of functions. And I was going to say, hey, Frank, how much is it going to cost us to do this scope? And that's what I'm going to bring back to the committee at the next meeting. So, I think we're all thinking the same way. We're starting to think about where it goes later.
So anyway, back to Steve having the authority, is that what we're looking for right now?
Right.
I would solicit a motion
You know where I'm going with
to
this.
approve the economic development agreement and the chairman to sign and make appropriate changes with the advice of the joint selectmen.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Congratulations, gentlemen. I think that's awesome.
So now we'll move on to the Clifford Park redevelopment plan.
No. Oh, yes. Now I'm jumping ahead.
Now you're moving
Say,
back, he's stopped and he's
I
moving back
arrowed
down
him
the
this time,
list
so I
now.
didn't forget him.
So, actually, I'm gonna do, I'm sure the camera's moved on it by now, but I'm gonna explain what we have up. In the last couple of months, we had some discussion about possibly doing something with Clifford Park, possibly using TIF revenues to do that. So, based on that conversation, I went and we contracted Knickerbocker Group to help us work on this concept plan. I was hoping to have it digitally by now, but they're working on some more changes that I've already asked them to do in a budgetary figure. But the chairman really wanted to get this out so that we can start discussing it publicly. Essentially what you see there is a very radical redevelopment of Clifford Park. Add in more field space, more usable field space. You can see dog parks, a lighted Little League field, multi-use recreational fields, and some walking trails. It also works very well with the proposed sidewalk that should be developed next year. What we would like to do now, let me start over. Then we brought in the chairman, the vice chairman, and a respected resident that is passionate about recreation to kind of do the first test. We went through a couple of drawings, decided ones that we liked and didn't like. This one passed a lot of the tests with a couple of revisions, and we decided that this is the concept plan that we'd like to bring forward. Right now, we're working on ballpark construction estimates, and I think what I would like to recommend to the Board of Selectmen is that we put together a building committee that can start going through the finer points of this concept plan so that we can propose at town meeting this redevelopment. The committee I think would be tasked with figuring out, where do we put fences, what color are fences, those things, with the general concept being the same. But I know not everybody has seen this in this forum, even some selectmen, so here it is for you to look at.
Reality of it is, 10, 15 years ago, we had a park committee that wanted to do something similar to that, and it kind of had gotten fallen by the wayside because it always comes up to who's going to pay for it, how are you going to pay for it. We potentially have a funding source now with the TIF district, which it would be a zero cost to the taxpayers. And anybody that's ever had a kid that's played youth sports in this area, spring or fall, you know how hard it is to get a baseball field, to get a field. Anybody with kids that played Little League, you have to go down to the field and you get to wait for the bigger kids to play their home games, and then Little League might get to start at 6 and they have to end at 7. There is a dedicated, the left-hand side field is a Little League field, period. That would be theirs. The other field would be for minor league, no more having to wait for soccer, or, as it is now, we've run into quite a few incidences where either soccer or lacrosse wanted the field, and minor league baseball wanted the field, so they there's no more fighting, I don't want to use the word fighting, but competing for the field. It's there.
One of those fields seems to overlap one of the baseball fields.
It does. It does, and that's, what that amounts to is, you can have a minor league baseball game there, but yet, I think when it's redesigned, it's gonna be a little bit different, but that whole other field is still open. So, there's still plenty of room there. For years and years, baseball's kind of dropped off a little bit for the kids, and I think a lot of that was because of field space. Anybody with kids, Frank, we've all witnessed it. It's a nightmare to go down there and try to use the fields. This will give them a dedicated spot. There's a walking trail for anybody that wants to do it. There's a dog park. There's a new playground. There's something for everybody there. And there's bathrooms. What's that?
A lot of green space.
Absolutely.
We'd like the building committee to be bold, too, and build what we want to build. Ideally, the concept that I'd like to bring forward once we have a final design and construction estimates is to bring forward a question to town meeting to borrow the money and pay for it with our TIF revenues. And that is a fairly easy concept to pull off, but let's design it first, and then I'll show you how to pay for it.
One other thing that we've thrown in there is, you can see around the Little League field, there's light poles. it's a lit field. I mean, I think if you've got 2 Little League fields that you can have, or possibly 3 if you wanted to add another one in the other corner, you could have Little League tournaments here. Talk about an economic development thing. I mean, we've never been able to have that before because we don't really have anything to offer for a Little League tournament. That brings a lot of families that spend money, so.
Couple of statements. One of them a comment on Clifford Park. Over the years, and I drive back and forth along Back River Road probably 4 or 5 times a day, and my wife says I go out on too many errands. But over the years, we have seen more and more and more families using the park, and not just Boothbay resident families. During the summer, when you get tourists up here with little ones, you can do just so much touring, and you gotta get a 3-year-old out running around in the park, and we see a lot of that, and it's a neat thing to see. So, one, I'd like to be on the building committee on this, but I also have a question. When we look at funding that from TIF revenues, I worry that the cost of this wouldn't be so much that we couldn't do other things with TIF revenues. As you know, I want to see that water and sewer get down the street, and I don't have a concern over which one comes first, but I want to make certain that we're doing the right things, that money's there.
Knickerbocker felt, I mean, I don't want to put them on the spot by any means, but talking, when we met with Knickerbocker and Jim, and that's a pretty flat piece of property already.
Yeah.
So realistically, you're not talking about a whole lot of money to do what, I mean, that's, I hate to use the word peanuts, because it isn't, I mean, any money, but compared to what it would cost to build it from scratch, I mean, I think probably the most expensive is to get the sewer and the water across there.
Right.
Often-
And we've had preliminary discussions with the church about using an easement to get water and sewer to the big red building, which would be a pavilion. We're thinking that could be storage slash bathrooms slash, maybe places for media or something for games. There's a lot of possibility there. Yeah.
Yeah, I went to a couple of Little League games this year in California. My daughter was having surgery, and it had nothing to do with his Little League field right up the street from her. And just watching what was going on with the concessions and the families and the support and stuff, I think a Little League tournament would be a fantastic thing to have.
Well, you go to other towns, smaller towns than our community, and when I say our community, I include Boothbay Harbor and Southport, because we are a community. They have beautiful fields. That when you go to a Little League, I mean, when my son used to play Little League, we went all over. And there's just beautiful fields. And then you come here and, we can play in a half an hour when the varsity baseball gets done.
Yeah, and that's not right.
I agree. I mean, if you want to, you got to start them young and work their way up through. And I mean, I think this would be ideal for the kids. And it would, I mean, if adult softball ever came back again, there's a place for it. It's.
I guess I would urge the building committee or the planning committee or the development committee on this to keep a close eye on what the track's doing in Boothbay Harbor. Because there's talk of building that track down there if they get on line with it, and putting a football, soccer field in the middle of that. So if it turns out that that's going to happen down there, let's not end up with too many soccer fields. Maybe we can scale the project back a little bit by keeping an eye on what they're doing too, and let's not duplicate.
Well, even if they build a soccer field down there, Frank, there's still lacrosse.
Yeah, that's the one thing, there's a couple things here. One, I know Steve's passionate about baseball, Little League, softball. These are the words that come out of his mouth a lot, but there's soccer, there's lacrosse.
Field hockey.
There's field hockey. There's a lot of sports on this peninsula that require large fields. And those fields are pretty thin for practices as well. So.
Certainly if there's a need for it, great.
No,
I'm just saying we need to pay attention to what they're doing there.
Oh, yeah.
I'm with you, I'm with you entirely, 100%, but I'm just saying that big, large green space there could be used for practice fields, even when there's a game going on. When varsity's playing on the big field, the JV can be practicing someplace else, or the elementary school can be practicing someplace else.
There's never enough field space in this area in the spring and the fall, ever.
I was talking to, I think his name's Sproul, he has the Midco Soccer League, And he was telling me that he has a hard time finding spots for games to take place at Clifford Park because the Y went in and took basically all the field time. And now, instead of negotiating with the town, he has to negotiate with the Y. He's trying to find places to have games, so there's definitely a need there.
I think we need to be very clear up front. This would be a community field, not a Y field or a school field.
Yeah, you gotta be careful who has control over
Through
it.
this office.
I agree, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely, that was just one person's feeling, but, and this is a person who's passionate about soccer.
I mean, that's not, I don't want to make it sound like I'm saying that the Y can't use it, the school can't
No.
use, but I think everything needs to, the scheduling all needs to go through the town.
Who has control is what.
I mean, I think you do now, though, right, Jim?
We do the scheduling, and what I can say, what his complaints are probably is that the Y is very organized. And they come with us with schedules and requests for field space very early on. So then when somebody comes with another request for field space, we usually say, can you guys reconcile this yourselves? Because the town doesn't want to tell anybody no. And usually that community members don't like to have to go to the Y and say, can I use this space?
I think
What
we
I
need to,
understand, and this person's complaint is that the Y took a lot of slots that they're not using,
Right.
and that's just not right.
The advantage in this is I think we could have two fields simultaneously, and if you're talking about Little League Baseball, you can almost be running 3 events at the same time. There's the opportunity to have outdoor entertainment kind of events, because we would have well manicured space. We talked in some of the concept designs about the possibility of maybe doing our what am I thinking of? Across in the Common on Thursdays, our
Farmers market.
Yeah.
farmers market down there. I mean, lots of ideas that are floating around that we need to figure out how to make them work. A part that I think will go unrecognized, but I know the Trails Group will recognize, is that because of the traffic in the common area, it's not always pedestrian friendly because there's really heavy traffic going through there. Now you're talking about a connection to Adams Pond Road, and so, I mean, a pedestrian connection through the center of town.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great idea, and it needs to continue.
Something for everyone. That's what I like about it.
I will say, I'm gonna be the outlier here. I love the plan, don't get me wrong, I'm all for it, I'm supportive in every sense of the word, but I look at a lot of field space and I see very little parking. And if you put on a Little League, I'd like to know where you're gonna put all those families and places to park all those kids
And
and
no
people.
parking behind the bus stop.
Well, I can address a little bit of that because we discussed with Knickerbocker, there really is a lot of parking in there, we just didn't highlight it. When you look at the heading north on Back River Road, there's all that parking still going to exist on the field space, the parking lot in the field itself. And then you're going to have a pedestrian access through the sidewalk to the town office.
Right.
You know, the common.
I realize that, this was gonna be overflow, and I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not saying we don't have any there, but I'm just saying, I think for a true Little League tournament, or some kind of outdoor concert, I mean, God forbid, the Rotary auction, you can't find a place to park within a half mile of the common when that's going on, so.
Right.
You know, if we ever got a real tournament, we'd have to look at space and shuttle, because you'd be having multiple games, families coming from many towns, and that's great.
Yes.
I look forward to having parking problems in the future.
Yes.
Yeah.
The more families you bring to the town, the more they might like the area and want to come here.
I'm all for the kids. I coached baseball, hockey. I was a monitor in a church for the teenagers that I didn't belong to. The more you can do for the kids, the better off they are as kids, and the better off as adults.
I agree.
I agree with you entirely.
If they have nothing to do, there's usually something going on. If they got something to do, and they enjoy themselves, they're gonna take care of themselves.
I think if this plan is presented correctly, that I can't see a negative, nothing negative about this. I think it's nothing but positive, so. I'm excited. I mean, been excited for that. I brought it up. You know, the old plan with Kenny Marston used to be on that committee years ago, and every time I've ever seen him, I think I bring it up, but it's kind of nice to have.
Parks and Recs Committee years ago.
So, should we develop a committee now?
I think we should advertise for it.
Advertise, right.
If you do want to establish a committee, we can solicit now, and at the next meeting, which I guess would be that workshop, we can start. And I don't even think we need to wait for their actual appointment to start working with Knickerbocker Group and start doing some work.
I agree.
Sir?
And Tom Nickerson, I know wants to be on it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
let me say that Tom Nickerson was our volunteer to help us look at the concept, and he was really insightful. We appreciate his help.
Contact Kenny Marston, too.
I had talked to him a little bit about it a month or so ago to see if there would be interest, and he said absolutely. He leaves in the wintertime, that's his only drawback from that. He
I'm
would-
quite sure he's already in Florida.
But he would be more than willing to.
So the idea would be that the committee would try to get this on track with the budget process so that at the end of March, we can put this on the warrant for town meeting.
That would be nice. With potential of start date of probably July after soccer and baseball is over with, correct?
Yeah, so as far as building, I think that's something I'll defer to the building committee on it, but the intention would be, yes, as soon as baseball lets out, I think we could have right at that field. And considering you're repurposing some of the field space that's down there, you could have active use of field space and be
Yeah.
constructing another spot at the same time.
Yeah, I was gonna say, could some of those areas be worked on while?
Yeah.
That section over that way, there's nothing there now, so.
We're gonna wanna use as much of our own resources, volunteer resources, to get this done at the best dollar value. And, you know, but also remember, this is how often do we do a completely local project that we're in control of everything? So we can put to work some local contractors on some of these issues
Absolutely.
as well.
I think that that's not a request, I think that's a requirement.
Yes.
We have some very good local contractors, I think that it only goes to locals. Next up is the Giving Tuesday proclamation.
So Giving Tuesday organization in our area has swelled in the last couple of years. Last year, they asked you to do a proclamation to identify the Tuesday after Thanksgiving as Giving Tuesday. They're asking the same request this year. I put together a resolution in the same spirit as the one in last year, so.
Make a motion that we sign the Giving
Resolution.
Tuesday resolution.
Chuck's made the motion, anyone second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? So now we can move on, no old business.
Not gonna approve the minutes again?
No, we already did that one, so we won't do it again. Town managers report, we don't really need to, that's on the website.
I covered everything in my written report. The only thing I would like to stress is that we did very well budgeting for the health insurance increase, which I wish we had done worse. I wish we were off on the other end, but we were close.
Public comment? I will entertain a motion to review the warrants and sign them upon review.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Motion to go into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056A to discuss personnel, not to return to regular session.
Second.
All those in favor?